Hello, everybody out there, all you friends, you neighbors, you brothers, you sisters, you comrades, all you citizens of the world. I'm Michael James, and I'm here in Chicago in the very blue 49th Ward, and I'm bringing you another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. Today, we're going to have a couple of old pal guests. Many of you know them both, Katy Hogan and Warren Leming. So we're going to talk with two comrades about things they're doing and have done. A little bit of information going forward. On the bad front, we have a real tragedy going on in the Middle East, and I'm not sure if it's going to get any better. I really feel that Israel has lost any higher ground that they might have had with the ongoing deaths in Gaza. And I just think people ought to pay real close attention to it. And whoever you have to write, you have to talk to, this is really rough and it's going to have ramifications for us down the line. On the good front, I was sitting in my upstairs room doing a little work and my wife called out to me, "Come quick, come quick." And lo and behold, what did we see? A red-tailed hawk right outside a window, just hanging out, waiting for a rabbit or a squirrel or some other kind of animal. And we got to take some photographs. Paige took some movies of it. It was a really wonderful experience. Another great thing that happened this week that I got notice on, you will remember we had two representatives from the Tampa Five, members of the New Students for Democratic Society at University of South Florida. And they had been challenging the president there over DeSantis's new exclusionary rules. They got busted. They got charged with all kinds of stuff. Well, the Tampa Five are proud to announce a great victory. Their misdemeanor and felony charges will be dropped. This is after a lot of mobilization, both in Florida and them going around the country. This is good. And it shows you that all our little actions, our demonstrations, our letter writing, our concerns can be heard and they can make a difference. Also on the good front, I would like to point out that George Santos, who was a short-term congressman from New York, is no longer in Congress. And Kevin McCarthy, lo and behold, he announced that he's not going to run. It makes the Republican majority much smaller. And who knows what will happen. And on that note, I would just like to share that don't be put off by all the propaganda about Trump winning the election, being ahead of Biden. It's really up to us, and it's the work and it's the education that we do in the months ahead before November's election, where we really can influence people, and hopefully world events will lead us in a better direction. Okay, so that's that. And on the labor front, besides the United Auto Workers and the SAG victories, one of the things that has come up is that the United Auto Workers is going to take on the VW plants again. And they're talking about going after Tesla. That would be great. And I'll remind you again that workers in Denmark are refusing to handle Tesla. So I don't know what's going on over there, but there is a challenge. Another thing on the labor front, Columbia College adjunct faculty are still on strike. It's been more than a month. The union says it is the longest strike of adjunct faculty in higher education history. The strike has been spurred by Columbia College cutting of 53 classes this fall and a number of 317 in the spring. The college cites under-enrollment and fiscal issues, which the union disputes. And one more good thing, I didn't grow up in the Catholic Church, but I've had a lot of Catholic friends. We are on a station, our home base is WLUW887 at Loyola University. And I'm glad to report that Pope Francis has fired a right-wing Texas bishop. His name is Edward Strickland, and also kicked out of the Vatican Raymond Burke, a cardinal. So the Pope is taking some moves for people who have trying to inhibit, block, stop, disrupt some of the more progressive things that he's been doing. Okay, in memoriam, I'd like to call attention to Norman Lear. I didn't watch a lot of non-sports and politics on TV, but I did take in Sanford and Sons and All in the Family. And he really broke ground. He broke a lot of ice. He raised progressive issues. He did it in a way that made people laugh. And I think that it'd be great if some of the people in the country would be watching those shows again. Okay, enough of the opening banner. We're going to take a small musical break, and we'll be back with our longtime pal, our business partner, our partner in producing this show. Sometimes she's a host, the one and only Katy Hogan. She's getting ready in the wings, and we'll be right back. So stay tuned here on the left end of your dial or wherever you're getting Live from the Heartland. Welcome back to Live from the Heartland. And as I said before, at the end of the banter, our next guest is someone that many of you who listen to the show on a regular basis for many years know, the one and only Katy Hogan, my longtime business partner and very close friend in the Heartland Cafe, longtime co-host of the show here, and we love having her whenever we can get her. And she is still a producer of this show. And one of the things that people should know about Katy Hogan is she's always had an urge to travel. And she's done a lot of it. She's been to Mexico. She's been to Europe. She's been a lot of places. I'll let her tell you. But ever since I know her, she was going off on adventures, a lot of excitement, saw a lot of things, had a lot of close calls. And most recently, she told us a long time ago she was going to go off to Spain and walk the Camino. And, it seemed like a long time away. And then all of a sudden it got to be a week, few days, and she went. And now she's back. And I think we did have a brief report on her trip when she first got back. But this is going to be a Katy Hogan travelogue about her experiences just recently over in Spain. So hello to you, Katy Hogan.
Hello, Michael James. Nice to see you, Pard. I don't think I've been on since I came home from the Camino. I think I was on before I left.
Well, we can always check, but that's good because we don't want people that had heard any of this before.
Exactly.
This is a lot of new material. So tell us about your ongoing desire to travel and go places and do things. Because ever since I've known you, you've taken off. And before I knew you had done some of that too.
That's right. Travel. It's, we don't need to really go into it deeply. Travel is a great gift. And for those of us in the United States, if we can travel outside of the United States, it's a double gift because we need, as people sitting in the mothership, as it were, that we are, we need to know what the rest of the world sees when they look at the U.S. And that was one of the great lessons that started for me when I first went to Mexico as a student back in 1970. And, once I saw that, one, they got different news than we did, but also they got a news that looks at the U.S. as the other or that big thing. It was it was an eye opener. So yeah, I've been absolutely fortunate to do an immense amount of travel. And one of the things that I have emphasized in travel is some sort of spiritual retreat or personal life development, and keeping in track of what is the soul of all of us and of us individually. So the Camino represented a thing that I had known about for many, many years, like 40 years. And it got more popular, certainly in the last 10 or 15 years. One of the reasons was that movie called The Way, really good flick. Did show a way of doing the way. So what I did, first of all, I want to say I only did part of the Camino. I did 110 kilometers of the Camino, which is actually 800 kilometers total of the path that I use, which is the Camino Francés, which starts just outside of Spain in France, right before you start with the Pyrenees. So the full Camino is quite a feat. And I hurry to say that is not the feat I pulled off. Nonetheless, having said that, the Camino is the Camino. And once you're on it, you're on it. And the magic of it comes to you even if you're only doing 5 to 10 miles a day, which is what our group did, instead of the 3 times that the folks who are doing the long haul do, which is they do anywhere from 10 to 30 miles a day, even at times, in order to get through it. So I had a very different experience. Before I left, was making a glib joke about it and describing to people I'm doing the bougie Camino because hotel rooms or rooms in casitas planned for us ahead of time. We had meals there all covered ahead of time. So the real Camino, doing the real Camino as a pilgrim from the very beginning means you often don't know where you're sleeping that night. And that can cause a little bit of anxiety as you get more and more tired and wonder where will you rest yourself. So our group, which was all over 50 years old, well, there was one gal who was pushing 50. But for us, this was a real treat. The setup put together by the folks at Ananda Travel, Expanding Light, they call it. This is the reason I chose them. Each day, we would start with meditation in the dark. We would pat ourselves down to whatever room we had at that location to sit in silence. We would do a little bit of chanting and then silence for about 20 minutes, not a long meditation, but absolutely effective. And then we would eat breakfast together. Every single time we sat down to breakfast or dinner, we sang our grace, which those of us who didn't know the words or whatever, we learned it real quick within a couple days. And such a sweet thing, but a little bit, some people were a little concerned that we were doing this in open dining rooms that included other guests and maybe other pilgrims. That discomfort went away immediately, because almost immediately, as most of us learned the words and we sang it together, it was a beautiful sound and people would applaud in the dining room. And the other thing we did was we sang to the innkeepers or the folks who hosted us. We would encircle them out in front of their place before we started our walk and sing them a song that was in thanks for their hospitality and hoping to meet them down the road. I mean, stuff, it would make the innkeeper cry, tear up. And the other thing that happened that was different for us that made it all possible was at the end of each day, if there was room, and most times there was, one of our leaders, Satyana, would lead us in a stretching / yoga thing that would last about 45 minutes that was absolutely healing and allowed us to go on and be strong. So we were on the deluxe Camino trip, I gotta say, because of both the prayer and the exercise. And the other thing I would add too that was extremely important to all of us was every day that we walked, which was all 12 days, we would walk for an hour in silence. We started our walk for an hour not speaking. 201, every one of us thought that was essential for the kind of focus that we were able to give our Camino. But okay, so the history of the Camino.
Let me ask you a couple questions, and then we can.
Okay.
One of the things was, let me just fire at you. What led you to do this now in your life, and why did you pick that rather than going back to Jamaica or Canada or one of the other places you've gone off to?
Well, the Camino is a very unique and specific and world. It's a UNESCO world site. It's one of the three great pilgrimages in Christendom. The others being to Rome, and the one that no one can do right now, the one to Jerusalem. So, and you may say, well, you're not that big of a Catholic, Katy. I mean, what are you doing going on this?
You've definitely been influenced by the Catholic Church.
I mean, I am someone who was raised in Catholicism, so I have the freedom to say what I do and do not, focus on in that. And that doesn't necessarily make me a cafeteria Catholic, although some would say yes. But I'm secure in my starting point with getting in touch with spiritual connection with the cosmos. And the Catholic Church gave me that when I was like 8 or 9 years old. And so I have no problem with that. I have added to it, of course, thanks to Buddhism and Hindu, the Hindus who affected me in my yoga teacher training. So what this was I didn't want to return to Jamaica or somewhere else. I wanted to do this thing. And there's no other way to do this thing and no other way to get what I got from it, but go to Spain and do it. And I was thrilled to be in Spain for the first time in my life and we followed it up with some time in Portugal as well. Go
Let
ahead,
me,
ask another question.
the, you know, you and I used to, before we opened the Heartland, we were running lots of miles up and down Lake the Front. We both have done marathons. You broke 4 hours in Germany with a bunch of Olympic athletes, way better
I
time.
love that you always remember that.
Well, it's, I only did about 4:32 or something, and I'm very much humbled by that. Uh, and my daughter has had Casey Blue has a better time too. But I've known you lifting weights. I've known you doing yoga. I've known you doing running. And I watched you get ready for your Camino trek, and you just blew me away. I'd drop you off way on the west side where we were meeting someone in an office. And then you decided to walk back to Rogers Park, 7, 8, 10 miles. You were putting in a lot of miles. And so I was very much impressed with your training. I don't know if you want to say anything about the training and how many miles you actually had to put in each day, et cetera.
Well, thank you for all of that. That was part of the reason. That's also part of the draw to me to the Camino, was the physical aspect to it, that it would require me to do some training, which it did. And I did from May until I left in September, a lot of walking, as you said. But because, again, we were doing, our average daily mileage ran between 5 and the low end to 9 or 9.5 on the tall end. So I knew back from our marathon days, frankly, that if I could do half of that comfortably any day, I would be fine. So I did I did only 2 or 3 9-mile walks. And I did many, many 6 and 7-mile walks. And I used walking to my job at Gethsemane and back as training as well. So walking is, everything is walking distance, as long as you have enough time.
Your muscles don't hurt. I'm having a hard time walking now. I got some pains in my leg. I don't know. But you got to keep walking is the basic thing. And I believe in that. So you went over there with a pal. And how many days did you have in Spain or France or whatever until you started?
We started out in Madrid. We had a couple of 3 days to acclimatize ourselves in Madrid, which was a wonderful city to see the Gaudi, the museums there, walking around. I loved it. And I also loved using my Spanish. The friend that would always be very impressed, but that's because she didn't speak any Spanish. And I would be telling her all the times that these Spanish people were saying, "Oh, your Spanish is so good." I would say, "This is all they heard me say," which is like one sentence that said, "Yeah, I'd love to have that bread too," or "Get me what she got." And she'd be like, and they'd be so kind and generous to say, "Oh, you have such good Spanish." And it blew me away every time because they were basing that on like the simplest sentences.
I had that same thing. I'll say things like "Viva la gente, todo poder a la gente," and I'll have a couple of phrases that I can whip off, and people think I could speak Spanish pretty well, but I'm really terrible. But
I don't think we have to go to being terrible, but I think that anytime a U.S. citizen goes abroad and actually tries to communicate with the countrymen in their language, the appreciation level is, off the charts, because they get so many Americans sitting down going, "I'll have a Coke, please," expecting, that
Let me ask you, Katy, what do you think has led to so many people doing it? Since you did the Camino, Connie Voisin, the poet, we know she's done it. A friend of mine, Matt, he did it.
Yeah, more than 300,000 people are doing it annually now, which is huge, huge. And I'm not sure I think a lot of people are drawn to getting away from the daily, and that's to me the sweetest thing. To go on one of these things is to not watch TV for a month. It's to not, for me, miss a night sleeping in my bed because I fell asleep on the couch. I slept in a bed every single night. The lights went out and I went to sleep. It was totally wonderful thing. I ate really well. People in Europe eat better than us. I'm sorry, folks, but that's the case. Their food is closer. It doesn't travel in semis or airplanes for hours or days, and it makes a huge difference. And people were astounded at how much they loved the food. What was the other question? Part of this question? I forgot.
Why people were walking.
Oh, why so many? Yeah, why so many? Oh, I think it's the absolute best antidote to life as we know it right now. Just shut off the noise, get away from all of the input and the social media, et cetera, and test yourself. Who do you find when you're out there walking by yourself for hours on end through the beautiful countryside? It's like the central life question to me, that we all seek to get the answer to, and it's one of the few ways we have of doing it that isn't sort of life challenging. I mean, I've done harder things like walk in higher places for periods of time, but the same thing happens. You get to yourself and you get to find out what's there for you, what do you bring home to your people from a thing like this? And I'm still figuring that out.
What did you glean? What's the most important thing you got out of this trip?
To keep doing things like this is important.
Have you been walking a lot since you came back?
I have continued to walk, not as much, given that it's getting winter, but I walk to work still, and I mean to walk more each day, but I haven't done as much as I might have.
Well, we're gonna have to go out, so I'm gonna ask you two more things. One would be, what are your next plans for vacation trip, for spiritual enlightenment? Have you got it figured out yet?
I think I'm going to glean spiritual enlightenment from publishing a book with you this year. That's going to be a spiritual trip for me to finish the Heartland book.
Yeah. Can we share with people what we're calling it right now?
No.
Okay, I won't do that. I got one more thing, Katy. Would you be so kind as to sing us the grace right now?
No, I forget the tune.
Oh, geez, because you have a nice voice.
I forget the tune. I just read the words the other day that were in something else. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were going to ask that, or I would have.
Well, that was a secret. I was popping it on you. Okay. You always have a lot to share. I know you're a political animal, and we are all gearing up for the next 11 months of talking to everybody we can, sharing all the positive things we know are going on, combating all the lies that are out there. Do you have any parting words to share with the multitude of listeners or viewers to the Live from the Heartland show?
Well, I hope everyone does get involved and understands that, like Liz Cheney said earlier this week with her book published, another term of Trump would be absolutely dangerous to the democracy. And I totally agree with Liz Cheney, and we cannot allow it. So everyone should understand they've tried to separate us. Let's give up on the blue and red bullshit. Excuse me.
Right on. I like that. Give it up.
We're all, Texas isn't a red state. They elected Beto O'Rourke, for gosh sake. We've got voters of every stripe in every state. So let's get them, and let's get them to vote for Biden-Harris and leave this hell of Trump behind us forever.
Right on, sister. Thank you, Katy Hogan, for coming on Live from the Heartland.
Thank you, Michael and Hal.
All the rest of you, stay tuned. We're going to have a musical break. Who knows what it will be? And we will be right back with our next guest, the one and only Warren Leming. Welcome back to Live from the Heartland. I'm Michael James up here in Chicago's very blue 49th Ward, although I'm into not using the blue and red so much. We are all Americans and we got stuff to do together. But that said, it brings me a lot of pleasure to bring on our next guest. The first time I ever met him and saw his band, Wilderness Road, and we're talking about the one and only Warren Leming, was at Alice's Restaurant, or Alice's Revisited, on over just off of Lincoln Avenue. And it was the same day that I got sucker punched. It was a Rising Up Angry event. We were raising money for the cause. And there was a guy from the far South Side who was messed up on drugs and downers and was kind of spitting in my face. And I kind of pushed him away, and I turned and I said to others, get him the F out of here before the police come. And just then he flew through the air and gave me a broken jaw. So I don't know if I got to hear much of your set that first time I saw you, Warren.
Yeah, for good reason.
I got to know, Wilderness Road on Columbia Records. I still listen to them. You not only had a very good musical career, but you went on to make films and do poetry and do plays, all with a bit of a political bent, because you are a political animal. So
absolutely. And I was involved with a guy named Paul Sills, and he started something called Second City with some other guys, which everybody by this time has heard of. And then we went on to a thing called Game Theater. That's where I met Sills. Now, what drew me to that scene was not so much the games and the Viola Spola method, which is a wonderful improvisational method. I even taught it at one point. What drew me to Sills was one of the first American Brechtians. Okay, and Brecht was my guy in the sense that you can look at modern theater, but you can't go around. You got to go through Brecht in order to get to modern theater, because he was the theatrical genius of the 20th century, which made a lot of people on the right unhappy. It's difficult when the greatest playwright, poet, dramaturgical force of the century is an open communist. That made for real problems for the State Department.
And how did you discover Brecht?
I was led to Brecht through a series of readings that were being done. Actually, I was studying German at the time, and I was in Germany, and I suddenly realized that this guy was not just a poet of genius, but here was the audience I'd been waiting for in terms of my own work, and I had been doing reviews, satirical reviews, et cetera, and I had read a lot of Marx, and at that point, it occurred to me that this is a guy who's really synthesized all of that thinking, and he developed a performance style. Anyway, I wound up doing some work at the Berliner Ensemble, getting to know Barbara Brechtschall, who was Brecht's surviving daughter. And it was a pretty exciting experience. I was in East Germany at a time when the wall was still up, and I was there at the sufferance of the East German government. And I had a pal from Texas who's since passed to the great corral beyond, but Dave was a wonderful guy. And he and I, Dave McBride was his name, was a Yale grad, and we met in Berlin, and we shot a documentary, which is still around. It's called the Brecht Document. We shot a documentary with the permission of the East German government. Now, the CBS had been there 2 months before us, wanting to do something similar, and they had offered the East Germans $200,000, and they were desperate for currency. They turned them down and went with us, these two unknown socialist vagabonds in Berlin, and we got to make the Brecht documentary. They provided us with a car, and were more than gracious to us, I must say.
Warren, was that before or after your musical career?
That's well after, in a sense that's 83, 84, 85, 86. It's in that area, because I had gone to Germany with the expressed idea of working at the Brecht Institute in East Berlin. I had to get permission to cross the border. And, it was going, people would say, oh, you're going from the nightclub, that was West Berlin, to the factory, that was East Berlin. But they wanted my services at the factory, and the nightclub was not terribly interested in what I had.
Well, when I first got to know you a little bit, you were a pretty hot musician. You had a band that had some notoriety. Yeah. How did it come to an end, and you kind of moved on to your filmmaking?
Well, the band, like all good bands, needs a great audience. And you remember the 60s, you were a vital part of that. And I will get a plug in for your book, which has just come out, of the photographs that you did of Rising Up Angry, Power to the People. And of course, Wilderness Road worked a lot to raising whatever we could in the ways of money for Rising Up Angry, for the Black Panther Party, for the White Panther Party, for the Free John Sinclair movement. We were inextricably involved in that great movement that went on in the 60s, which you document so wonderfully in your book on Rising Up Angry. And I urge everybody to call, write, phone, wire Mike James and get a copy of the Rising Up Angry story, because it really is a remarkable series of black and white photographs. I love that gritty black and white stuff. It looks better now than it's ever looked before. And you get a real feel of the grit. But I remember those times vividly. We were deeply involved as a band, and we had a great audience. And that great audience was also composed of some people from Rising Up Angry who would help you along in terms of your own political development, because we played endless free gigs around a lot of those issues. I think we made a difference. I've had people come up to me decades later and said, we were trying to get a little community thing going, and you guys came out and you played a free concert for us, and we charged for it, and we made enough money to make that work. And there's a tremendous satisfaction, as you can speak to, in having lived within and worked within this community in Chicago and made a contribution to sustaining the things and the people we want to see happen.
Well, I'm glad that we're all still alive here and we can keep doing our stuff, because we got a lot to do still. Now, let me ask you.
Yeah. Well, apropos your book, I mean, I was thinking, these are the folks we need now.
Yeah.
Okay. What Rising Up Angry was doing is, is a precursor to what's happening now. And we know there's a slow rolling, not so slow rolling fascist coup going on. We know that Trump gets more irrational, as is fascism. It is an attack on intelligence. And you see that from Trump every day, and he gets crazier and crazier. And the media gives him more and more attention. There's more attention to Trump than there is to Biden. Biden is considered not good corporate media, because he is considered he doesn't have the star power that the media is after. The media wants sensation, okay? And they want somebody like Trump, who is saying outrageous stuff about dictatorship and about upending this democracy, which has been around, this attempt at democracy we call the United States. And it's a sad fact, but we in the 60s, as you know, I mean, we thought that there was going to be a blow up of some sort, and there might even be an armed insurrection. Who knew? And yet, this is all winding out now in and on the media as a kind of slow rolling judicial disaster. They can't, in a system that cannot shut up, cannot contain, and cannot stop the lies. The system itself is then a lie. A system that will not shut down the lies is itself a lie. And that is the problem we're up against right now, is we're looking to these people, whether it's Merrick Garland and Justice or whatever, to come in and do something about this Trump's outrageous attacks on judges, on their wives. And this is intimidation. This is coercion. This is Roy Cohen's pupil we're talking about. Roy Cohen's boy, okay, who, as Cohen himself said, now I don't know if I can say this, I'm quoting Roy Cohen. He said, Mr. Trump, he pisses ice water. Now
you can say that. I've heard that word used in recent years on TV and radio.
Right, exactly. But we're in some deep stuff now, and we, as you have pointed out, we got to keep fighting.
Well, we're gonna, and one of the things that is very helpful in trying to educate younger people, or even people who've gone astray, is to try to get them to watch some good flicks. And one of the things that I know about you, partly because you have invited me and have interviewed me a few times for some movie that you and your friend Hugh are making. But you also made a couple of films. You made Algren's Last Night.
Right. We did, that's a
2003,
put together with a guy named Carmen Serby. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
American Road in 20. Tell us about the films you've made, because I actually found online a whole list of stuff that you're involved with in filmmaking areas,
Right.
and that I had no idea about. So tell
Well,
us about.
I had worked for a number of years with a guy named Dennis Mueller, rather, who is living in Burlington, Vermont, old pal of
Remember
mine.
Dennis?
And we had done stuff on the Palestinians. We had done a video, the FBI's War on Black America, which is still available, and a number of other videos having to do with causes, et cetera. And then Kurt Jacobson and I put together a thing on the beats, which had to do with American history. It's actually about the American road. And as a member of Wilderness Road, I'm well acquainted with the road. And in addition to that, I had done what I would call a kind of film noir video about Algren. It's only 6 or 7 minutes in length, called Algren's Last Night. And I had done it with Carmen Serby, who was a filmmaker here in Chicago. And it's on YouTube. I urge everybody to see it. I think it's a beautiful little piece of work. And out of that came a documentary that Dennis Mueller put together on Algren. And it's one of the better documentaries. There have only been two. There's a guy at Columbia College who did one. He interviewed the guy from the Smashing Pumpkins. What that had to do with Algren eludes me. But in any event, Dennis Mueller's documentary on Algren, based on, at least in part, on the inspiration he got from the Algren's Last Night that I put together, this attempt at what I'd call video noir. Dennis put together a wonderful biography, or documentary rather, on Algren.
Tell us a little bit about Algren, because you made this film, but you also put on a Nelson Algren yearly event, and you would honor various activists. And I think the year that I didn't show up there was the year you honored me. I know my name is on a poster. But those are fun events. Tell the younger people.
Every March, usually around the 28th or 29th, the 28th is Algren's birthday party in March. We do the Nelson Algren Committee, which I'm a member of, a founding member of, with Studs Terkel and Hugh Iglarsh and some other people. And we do a birthday party around Algren, and there are performers and whatnot. And it's a pretty good event, and we get a couple of hundred folks who come out on a yearly basis. We had to shut down for a couple of years because of the COVID thing. We're back in business now, and it's normally at where I live, 2418 West Bloomingdale, which is the Acme Arts Complex in Wicker Park. In any event, it's a good event, and it commemorates Algren. Algren was an American writer who was a victim of not much discussed McCarthyite putsch that went on in the 50s, when an attack was launched by the most right-wing sources in the government and elsewhere on any progressive writer, intellectual, whatever. I mean, people lost their jobs. It's like what happened to the Spanish Civil War vets who came back from the anti-fascist war in Spain and were hounded by the FBI for the rest of their lives. So Algren's was a sad chapter in the sense that he wrote that first book, Man with a Golden Arm, which is one of the first serious studies of drug addiction and what it meant to be a drug addict. And that was made into a not great film with Otto Preminger at the wrong guy to do that sort of film. And then it was followed up by a novel that Algren did, A Walk on the Wild Side, which Lou Reed based his song on the title. And that's in itself an interesting novel, and there's an interesting film that was done of that particular novel. Algren was, in 1948, the winner of the National Book Award. He went on to have a mixed career in terms of the same time he was coming to the fore, and he's a product, like all the intellectuals during the 30s, of the CP and their efforts to create an American literature that was leftist and progressive.
And he used to hang out at the Division Street bathhouse.
Right. Bathhouse was part of the cult.
I remember hearing that. Tell me a little bit about your film, American Road, and then I want to make sure we talk about Clancy Siegel.
American Road was our attempt at it. It's still available. You can get it through the internet. Or if you email me at coldchicagoco, all lowercase, one word, @gmail.com, I'll send you info as to how to get it. In any event, American Road was an attempt at taking the idea of the road, whether Kerouac's On the Road or just the road as a musical force, as a literary force in American life. America's always been about people moving, and usually moving west. And Wilderness Road had to do with that. We came up with the name years ago thinking it was a good name, which of course it is, but we had no knowledge of the fact that there was a Wilderness Road. And it turns out that was the roadway from the East Coast into Kentucky and Tennessee. And they were known then as the Dark and Bloody Ground because of the Indian colonial settler violence. And so Wilderness Road was, was one of the concepts of the film is about the road and the significance that the road has had for Americans, literarily and otherwise. We're people who like to move,
Yeah.
And Clancy Siegel, as an American writer, lived in England for many, many years. Wrote 4 or 5 really, really good books. One on the labor movement or aspects of it. Another one on R.D. Laing in England. He was associated with Laing. Terrific guy. Died recently and taught for many years at UCLA. He's taught screenwriting. But an amazing American guy who's been under the, like many of these folks, he's under the radar, but he's worth you looking into. So Google Clancy Siegel. Take a look at his.
Are you doing a film on Clancy Siegel?
We have done a documentary on Clancy Siegel. Yes. Yeah, we can make that available to people too. Again, just email me at coldchicago, spelled CO, @gmail.com, and I will give you the info you need to.
What is the Clancy Siegel movie named?
It's just Clancy Siegel.
Oh, good. I would like to see that one because I remember when I was hanging out with some people who had been involved with SNCC and had left SNCC, and
Right.
they apparently had all been, like the Mississippi Freedom Summer was over, et cetera. And they were reading Clancy Siegel's Going Away, which was kind of, I believe, a story about, longtime activist Communist Party then, and kind of where things were starting to fall down. Maybe it was in the 50s under the McCarthy period. I'm not sure, but it's
it was the 30s too. His Siegel's mother was an organizer, and he traveled with her, and she would get dropped into these impossible situations and somehow organize people and get the union movement going. These are really amazing people. I don't believe some of these biographies, and Siegel's is one, and his mother are two of these biographies. It harkens back to the days of Aunt Molly Jackson and the organizing around the mining struggles and all the rest of it. It's an amazing story. Amazing.
What are you working on now, Warren? What do you got going?
I'm working on some poetry, which is on my Facebook site, and it's a lot about the Trump people and the Trump regimes. And I'm trying to put together the rudiments of a review, which I want to stage locally, since I've done a lot of review work and I like satirical reviews. It's part of the Brecht legacy. I'd like to do something on Trump and just the whole Trump period, which has been really extraordinary, not in the best possible sense, but in many great ways, the worst possible sense. But of course, for people who are satirists, and I happen to be one, that's always what we wait for, are those moments when you really see the system and its adherents revealed. And satire is one of the ways that you do it.
Do you have a short poem you'd like to read us?
I was looking for something, and alas, I cannot get this thing to come up.
Well, I'll read it. I could read it next week, or if you send me a printed view.
Yeah, let's do that. I'll send you some of these.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Tell me one time, what is that film that you and Hugh were shooting that you had me interview for?
Well, we're doing a thing on the 60s, and we're doing a lot of interviews. Yours are among them. And that's still in a work in progress. So I wish I had more to say about it beyond the fact that it's something we're trying to do right, and that takes time.
Well, Warren Leming, you can always come back on this show, and I like having you on because you're a wealth of knowledge. And I do. What is the name of that play around the Civil War that you did at the Heartland?
Oh, Rich Man's War, Poor Man's Fight. Yeah. And I also have a lot of those CDs. So if anybody's looking for a lot of original instrumentals and songs on the American Civil War. I'm your guy. So it's called A Rich Man's War, Poor Man's Fight, in its original material. All of it, a lot of it instrumental, a lot of it, of course, song.
Yeah, I remember when we put that on at the Heartland. It was great. I want to encourage everybody out there to really do good in the world. Before I go, though, I would want to say that I want to thank people like Katy Hogan, Warren Leming, Tom Clark, Lynn Orman, Hal James for making this show possible. Coming up next week, we have tentatively booked the great writer, reporter Don Rose, the incomparable Alderman Chuy Garcia, and we have a few other people lined up for future shows. So once again, don't be discouraged by all the kind of pro-Trump talk out there. We can win these elections. It's up to us. It's got to save democracy and fight fascism. After all, democracy is a little better than fascism. So all of you do good in the world. The world needs all the good that you do. And have a great week. We'll be back next week with more Live from the Heartland. In the meantime, you can get it at Can TV. You can get it at youtube.com/Heartland Media, Spotify and Google Podcasts, and of course, WLUW 88.7 Chicago's Sound Alliance. Have a great week. Over and out.